Welcome to this bookmark session for parents and carers on supporting reading for pleasure, developed by the Open University. I'm Teresa Kremin, a Professor of Literacy and Education and an ex-teacher. So let's begin by exploring what we mean by reading for pleasure. Essentially, it's about children, young people and adults choosing to read and developing the habit of reading. It can involve any kind of text. It might be a poetry book, a non-fiction, a novel, and it often involves sharing that reading with others. Motivated and engaged readers often choose to read, and they find some satisfaction in reading and sharing the latest Bluey comic with their friends, perhaps, or reading a novel connected to a movie, or finding out more about dinosaurs, or climate change, or their favourite football team. It's vital we help children enjoy reading, because over the last 20 years, significant benefits have been identified with being that childhood reader, the reader who chooses to read. International studies show that choosing to read helps with comprehension, helps children understand what they're reading. It helps them build general knowledge and widen their vocabulary, both their spoken vocabulary and their written vocabulary. And therefore, of course, it impacts on their writing, particularly their narrative writing and their confidence as writers. Significantly, too, choosing to read enhances their well-being, their happiness, their health is associated with being a young reader. And so all these things come together to lead to enhanced attainment and well-being. And that's been documented right across the curriculum in mathematics and elsewhere. So maybe have a look at this list for a moment and think, what is it you were aware of and what surprises you? We want these skills and competencies for all our young people. For those who read for pleasure will fly further and faster through the primary and the secondary curriculum and on into life. Reading, of course, is a balancing act between developing children's skills as readers and their will, their desire to read. Children simply develop the skills of reading, but do not choose to read regularly in their own time, and they're not supported in that endeavour, then they'll lose out on the benefits I've just described. So I know you'll want to help them develop their skills as readers, guided by your child's school recommendations in this regard. And you'll also want to help develop their motivation to read, their desire to read in their own time, to read frequently, to feel positively about reading and being a reader, and wanting to chat to others about it. However, it isn't always easy. It's really quite challenging to fit reading into busy lives, and finding books too that engage each and every child, why, that's quite demanding too, but possible. And of course, we all know that the instant gratification of technology and many of their other interests will often compete with their time. But the important piece here is that we've seen across many international research studies and in England too, that reading for pleasure is declining. Less children today are choosing to read than over the last 20 years. And it's crucially important that we support them as readers. There are far too many young people who can read, who have the skills, but don't choose to exercise them. I wonder, is your son or daughter one of those? In England, it's now part of the national curriculum, but we can't make children read for pleasure. We can't demand that they do so or mandate it. But we can entice, we can model, we can invite and tempt them into the pleasure on the journey. Because it is a journey, and research suggests that if teachers and educators read to children, books, facts, things that they're interested in, and read with their children, sharing the journey, perhaps reading a line each or a paragraph or chapter each, over time they'll learn to read by themselves and will need still to be encouraged and supported to do so. Even young children will read by themselves, turning the pages of books that they can't yet read the words in, but are delighted by the pictures because they've been read and reread by their parents. They know the story, even though they can't read the words. And even older children who can read independently now still need support. So perhaps you might take a moment just to think, are there more opportunities you could build in to read to your children, with your children, and nudge them, enable, support them to read by themselves? There are 3 signposts to help you on the journey. It's all about finding the time, tempting them to find something that engages them, and then sharing that journey with them. So now I'm going to explore each of these. Creating some dedicated time at home to read is key to success in developing readers. And every family does it differently. Some choose to read to or with their youngsters in the morning before school, others choose at bedtime, but it just needs to suit your family. Maybe there is a space where you could sit down together to read. And this is, of course, different from listening to them reading the phonically regular books sent home from school. This is your time for you to read to them, or time for you to sit alongside your child and read your own text while they're reading theirs independently, or time for you to share a story together. And indeed, do involve grandparents, siblings, visitors, and so on, because this can reduce the pressure on you and may enable your child to hear stories in their heritage language as well as English. So I wonder, might you make a little more time that's protected for reading in your family? Might you be able to create a regular space on the weekend as well as those in the week? Frequency matters in this space, so once a week isn't really quite enough. Turning from time, let's look at tempting your young person to read. You know your child best, what they're interested in, the kind of text they might enjoy, whether it's Paw Patrol or Pikachu, Minecraft, skateboarding, animals, relationships. Their interests matter, and whatever their interests are, wanting to find texts that are around that focus. You can also tempt them through sharing the books you know. Perhaps you recognise some of these, or perhaps not. Perhaps you've read other texts. But if you could find one of the books that you read as a child, or perhaps were read to, then you'd be sharing your passion and interest, memory with your child, and making those connections, perhaps through discussing Harry Potter and having watched it as a film. Building those connections is important. But to ensure the books that you share and recommend reflect the diverse reality of children today in the UK, then I think we want to encourage you to explore some more contemporary choices. There are some brilliant books and magazines available now. Graphic novels are really very popular at the moment, and it isn't about a hierarchy. It isn't about getting longer, thicker, harder, fatter books with no pictures. The most important element is enjoyment. And as adults, we also choose to read magazines and newspapers that are packed with visuals. So maybe think about getting to know some of the books that your children might be delighted by. Richer choices will be available at your local library, and of course, they're free. And another big advantage is there's not only more to choose from, but librarians are often there on hand to help. And importantly, if your kid's taken home 2 or 3 books, say, they can choose the ones they want to follow through to. They aren't obliged to either like them, nobody's paid anything for them, and they aren't obliged to finish them. They can take back those that don't appeal and swap them. Public libraries offer a range of activities too, which are well worth joining in. Like the Reading Agency's Summer Reading Challenge, for instance, the theme of which changes every year, and it's free. And if the library's too far to go, then do think about making use of BorrowBox or another e-library app. They can be very helpful. You could listen on the go, for example, when you're travelling, and gradually build a collection of books that you know, that you share, and that you as a family can talk about together. So in summary, I want to stress that you will be effectively tempting and supporting your young reader if the texts they choose are relevant, are interesting, are accessible, and are motivating to them. Reading for pleasure is not about reading what others want you to read, but it's about what you want to read and what you find enjoyable and engaging. And every child is different. And let's remind ourselves that books aren't the only form of reading. There are many different kinds of texts, so you might find it interesting to take part in our Reading Together treasure hunt. If you follow the QR code, you'll be able to find this on our Reading for Pleasure website. And it simply involves exploring the many different kinds of reading that are in your home and helping children realise that reading takeaway menus and websites is still reading. Reading isn't just books. So let's turn to the third key signpost on this journey, and that's sharing. I'd like to read you a story now, so might I invite you to find a comfortable space to relax in just for the few minutes as I read it. I'll offer you a moment at the end to think about how you felt about being read to. I promise, it's a terrific story, worth listening to. My Dad is a Grizzly Bear by Swapna Haddo and Dapo Adiola, shared with kind permission of Macmillan Children's Books. My Dad's a Grizzly Bear, written by Swapna Haddo and illustrated by Dapo Adiola. Shh, beware. My Dad's a Grizzly Bear. He has the fuzziest fur that scratches and scritches. Mum laughs and teases him when he gives her big sloppy kisses. He chases me and my sister, growling and waving his enormous paws because he's a grizzly bear. He eats all the honey in the house. It drips off his crumpets and sticks to his whiskers. Drip, drip, drip. He never leaves any for me because he's a grizzly bear. He naps all the time, anywhere, any place, day or night, in the car, in the pool, in the playground, and even in the cinema, especially in the cinema. Sometimes he's asleep even when he's awake. Are you asleep, Dad? Yes. When he does wake up, he's so grumpy. He grumbles and grunts and stomps around, hunting for food, because he's a grizzly bear. Sometimes, on the weekends, Dad makes the whole family go for long walks in the wood, even when our legs are aching and our noses are frozen. He's never cold because of all his thick grizzly bear fur. Sometimes he catches fish in his teeth, and sometimes he climbs to the top of the tallest tree, and sometimes he can run faster than a bus, and he has the loudest growl, all because he's a grizzly bear. One day, Dad packed up the car and said, "We're going camping in the woods." I hate camping. The food's always soggy, we always get lost, and it always rains. We had to eat our wet, mushy sandwiches under a tree while Dad set up our tent. Dad was very happy because he's a wood-dwelling grizzly bear. And at bedtime, Dad went for a wander in the woods. Perhaps he was looking for his friends. Mum tried to cheer us up with a story. It was all about a grizzly bear, a huge grizzly bear, a huge, hairy, very scary grizzly bear, a gigantic, terrifying, hungry, very hungry, oh so hungry grizzly bear. Help, Dad! Maybe my Dad is a bit grumpy and a bit fuzzy, and maybe he does eat all the honey, and maybe he would rather live in the woods, but when I'm scared, there isn't anyone else who can give me the biggest, warmest, best ever bear hug. My Dad may be a grizzly bear, but he's my favourite grizzly bear. And besides, there are fiercer things than bears. Wait until you hear my mum roar. There are many pleasures of reading aloud, and maybe you experienced some of these feelings as I shared the book. Much will depend upon the book, though. But when you're reading aloud to your children, try to keep it relaxed and informal. You may find that your child, depending on their age and their tiredness, wriggles and gets distracted, but I'd encourage you to keep determined, keep looking at the pages, pointing things out, and chatting together. Chatting not only helps retain their involvement, it's also critically important for developing their understanding. So you'll want to be chatting about all sorts of things. Chatting, for example, about the characters, the daddy bear who's always on prowl for more food, especially honey, or maybe the places, the woods, say, and making the connections between trips you've been on, your own family's favourite foods, and where things have gone wrong or where it's rained. At the heart of reading is making sense, making meaning, and that happens through making connections with our lives and with the lives of others. So chatting about a book and remembering, laughing and making connections to your life is really important. There's an Open University book chat resource you may find useful as well. It's got a guide too, with a number of prompts to help you. But the key thing here is not to get stressed, but to keep it light and enjoyable, taking turns rereading, spending time looking at the pages, looking at the visuals. It's not a race to read the words, but a journey to enjoy the meaning and to enjoy the time together. We have other resources on the Open University's Reading for Pleasure site too, so do feel free to explore them and maybe download this poster to support you. I do recommend you set regular time for reading at home, and that you try to tempt your young people by exploring texts from school, from the library, and from in and around your home that might interest them, and to talk about these texts, to share them together. Because reading to your children and reading with your children and supporting them as they become motivated and read by themselves is so important. It's a special journey, supporting your child's reading for pleasure, and it's a journey worth taking. Thank you for listening, and happy travels as you make the journey together.